Hello and welcome in to another edition of the Cornhusker Huddle. I am your host, Brian Moore. Today we're going to be doing a recap of the defense's performance, in particular the linebackers and the defensive line and their performance, as well as taking a look into the future. What do those position groups look like going into 2025? In terms of the Blackshirts' performance in the Pinstripe Bowl, they completely dominated that game from start to finish. Nebraska allowed 348 yards of offense. 301 of that was through the air, so there was some issues in the secondary. There's going to be more on that in tomorrow's episode. Today, like I said, linebackers, defensive line, my two favorite positions on defense. They only allowed 47 rushing yards for the game at 1.8 yards per carry. Another dominating effort from the Blackshirts in the run game. They did force 2 fumbles, Vincent Shavers on the sack, and then John Bullock on his sack. That one they did recover. The one that Shavers forced, they did not recover, unfortunately. There was another sack to make 3 total for the game. Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmaker combined on a sack as well. Boston College had the ball for 28 minutes, 44 seconds for the duration of the game. Like we mentioned in yesterday's video, Nebraska won the time of possession battle. The defensive line is where we're going to start today because we got a lot of question marks in that room going into next season. So I want to hit that group first. So where are we sitting with Riley Van Poppel coming back? Where are we sitting with Elijah Judy coming back, Keona Davis, etc.? Right? So defensive line dominated, like we said. Riley Van Poppel played 23 snaps. He looks to be the heir apparent to Nash Hutmaker in the middle. He did redshirt this season. They did the 4-game redshirt. Of course, he played in the bowl game for his 5th game. That does not count. Postseason play, conference title games do not count towards the redshirt. Originally, I was not a fan of that decision from the coaching staff, but this is why I'm sitting here in my basement doing a podcast, and they're getting paid millions of dollars to coach football. Originally, I was not a fan of it. I thought we needed another guy in the middle, but Ty and Nash really did a solid job this season holding down the middle from start to finish, really. There was no games where there was an issue with teams running the ball against us, except for Indiana, which that was the obvious outlier for the season. USC got a little bit moving on the ground game as well, but overall, the season was phenomenal with the run defense. I haven't looked at the final numbers yet because the playoffs are still going on, but I imagine Nebraska's run defense is going to finish in the top 20 for the 2nd season in a row. Elijah Judy did have a decent game. That was probably not his best game. He had a handful of missed tackles, but he had a decent game. He played 30 snaps. I would expect that Riley Van Poppel and Elijah Judy are going to be your 1A, 1B on the defensive line next season in terms of the defensive tackle spot. I think Nebraska probably runs more 4-man fronts than they do 3, but when they run the 3, I would probably expect Riley Van Poppel to get the bulk of those snaps. Elijah Judy is going to be probably the second guy in my opinion, but obviously there's a lot of time now from now until the season starts. So we'll see where we're at come fall. Right now as things sit though, I'm thinking RVP takes over at the nose. Keona Davis played 18 snaps. Getting him back from the portal was huge for Nebraska. He was a true freshman. Nebraska signed him late. He was originally going to sign with Washington. Obviously, their coach then left Alabama, Kalen DeBoer, and then that left him kind of in no man's land where he didn't want to follow him to Alabama, but he didn't want to stay committed at Washington. So Nebraska scoops in, lands him. He has a really solid first season at Nebraska. He's a guy that I think is going to anchor down one of those edge spots on the defensive line for the foreseeable future. He only played the 18 snaps that I mentioned already. He played pretty well in those 18 snaps. I can't wait to see how he develops over the course of the next, what do we got, 8 months until the season starts? I hate saying that. I hate the offseason for football. For the next 8 months, we'll see how he develops. Jordan Ochoa did play 8 snaps. He was kind of in that James Williams role, the former walk-on from Colorado. I don't anticipate him having a consistent presence on the defensive line, at least not next season. He was redshirting this year. This was the only game I think he played in for the whole season. So I'm not entirely sure what his future outlook is. Obviously, it kind of depends on what we add through the portal, which we're going to talk about some of those guys we've already added that we know about. We can't talk the defensive line without talking Ty Robinson. 4 sacks, 1 sack, 4 hurries, and 5 total pressures for the game. I think that still is the record for postseason play this season with 5 total pressures. I'm not sure if another defensive lineman has got more than Ty did in the Pinstripe Bowl. Nash played great as well. Him and Ty are such a force in the middle. They were disrupting the run constantly, pretty much every play, obviously, with the 1.8 yards per carry. And then they obviously were a big factor in the passing game, getting a pass rush up the middle. Nash eats those 2-man blocks, the double team blocks all the time. That really freed up Ty Robinson this season. Ty Robinson led the way for the Blackshirts for sacks. I think he was at 7 or 7.5, maybe 8 for the duration of this season. I hate losing those two to the NFL, but I'm so happy that they're going to have that chance to continue their careers in the NFL. Me, as a Chiefs fan, I'm hoping we can land one of them. But regardless, they're going to be someone I watch in the NFL for a long, long time. The other guy that could be the anchor on the other edge spot that we haven't talked about yet is true sophomore Cam Lenhart. Obviously, coming off his freshman All-American season last year, we did expect Cam to take a pretty sizable jump going into his sophomore season. Unfortunately, I don't think we really saw that jump we were hoping for. He did play well this season, don't get me wrong. It's just, I don't think he even played as good as he did his freshman All-American season. So we'll see where his development goes. Obviously, I think he's got a super bright future. He's going to be someone that we see at least in the rotation, if not starting next season. No question about it. So what does the future look like on that defensive line with Ty and Nash moving on? Who is coming back? Well, we've already talked about a handful of those guys. Riley Van Poppel, Cam Lenhart, Keona Davis, Elijah Judy. All those guys are back. That is a really solid group to build around. But as we all know, Nebraska lost a lot of guys to the transfer portal. So who's coming in that can help? Since we lost Jamari Butler, we lost Princewill Umanmielen, we lost James Williams, and I think that may be it to the guys that we lost from the portal. So they have landed 2 guys from the portal that are signed. Everything's ready to roll. They're going to be enrolling in Nebraska here in a couple weeks once the semester starts. I think that starts on January 20th. Don't quote me, but it's around that time frame. Those guys we're talking about is former 2024 5-star, number 1 edge, top 20 national recruit Williams Nwaneri. He is transferring in from Missouri. And then we also landed Jalen George. He's a transfer from, I believe it was Middle Tennessee State, somewhere in the FCS ranks in Tennessee, I believe. He's going to be a solid rotational guy that we can have on the defensive line. In particular, he's going to be on that D end, that edge role, however Nebraska and John Butler want to define the D end or the edge, because the terminology seems to be changing every single season. A fun fact about Williams Nwaneri, if you didn't know already, he was coached in high school by Jamar Mosey, Nebraska's off-field coach. He's kind of the guy and behind the scenes that does all of Kansas City recruiting for Nebraska, along with many other areas. But if you pay any attention at all to Nebraska recruiting, you know that Nebraska is basically raiding the Kansas City market for all the top players. The amount of guys Nebraska has just completely taken away from Missouri, Kansas State, from the Kansas City area has been phenomenal. They're getting the best guys from the metro. As someone who lives in Kansas City, I can tell you this is like an area that has untapped potential in terms of high school football talent. We're seeing Jamar Mosey start to get Nebraska back into Kansas City. We've really struggled to do that over the years. Williams Nwaneri is ranked as the number 1 edge in the transfer portal right now. He's the number 9 overall player in the transfer portal per On3. Obviously, both these guys are going to be 2 deep guys. There's no way they're coming here to not play. Williams Nwaneri could push for a starting spot. I think he'll battle I think actually both these guys are going to battle with Cam Lenhart and Keona Davis for that number 1, number 2 spot on the defensive end edge spot. The one thing that Williams Nwaneri has that none of these 3 guys has is legit size. He is a monster of a human. That guy's got to be 6'5", 250, 260. He is a huge defensive end, NFL body. That's what I think benefits him. He's got those long, rangy arms. He can get some reach away from the tackles when he's rushing the passer. Jalen George is a little bit shorter. He's 6'2". Even Keona Davis is a little shorter. He's 6'3", 6'4"-ish. And then Cam Lenhart's really kind of a tweener. He could be an outside linebacker or he could be a defensive lineman. Nebraska likes him as a defensive lineman. He is about 6'2", 235, 240. He may be a little heavier than that, but last I recall, he was about 235, 240. And then who do we have coming in terms of the interior side of the defensive line through the portal? Well, right now, Nebraska has landed one portal defensive tackle. There could be another one to come. There was a guy from Appalachian State that was supposed to be visiting. He actually just canceled his visit. So right now we have the one guy we know of that has not only visited, committed, signed, sealed, delivered. And that is Gabe Moore. He is coming over from Mississippi State. He's got solid size for a defensive tackle. He's 6'3". He's 300 pounds. The one thing about Gabe that concerns me a little bit is freshman season at Mississippi State. He redshirted. Not a problem. That's very normal, especially for a guy on the offense or the defensive line. Usually almost all of them redshirt their first season. Doesn't matter if you're a five-star like William Nwaneri. The one concern, though, is he sat out his second season at Mississippi State. And there was supposedly a non-medical reason. At least that was a reporting that I saw on that. I'm not going to be able to confirm or deny that. I'm just going based off of what I've read. And so I don't know what that injury, non-medical injury was, but I'm not even going to begin to speculate. I just wonder what that was and if it's something he's able to overcome as he's coming into Nebraska. The high school recruits, who do we have coming in on that defensive front? We've got consensus 4-star, top 250 recruit, Malcolm Simpson, coming out of Galveston, Texas. Beautiful Galveston, Texas. He's coming in at 6'3", 255 pounds. He has stated that he could move inside to the interior of the line. That's something Nebraska kind of is leaving as an option for him. He's probably going to start out at defensive end, though. And sorry about my monitor thing. I keep having to move my mouse here to keep that up because my wife's not here to turn the screen timeout off. She's my IT person. She does all my editing. Back to Malcolm Simpson. So he's probably going to start out at defensive end with the ability to slide down inside after he adds some weight. 6'3", 255. This was a guy that Texas tried to steal late. Texas A&M, I believe USC was even in the mix. This was a guy that Nebraska identified very early. If you recall, he was like a low to mid-grade 3-star when he had committed to Nebraska. And then obviously his senior year starts. He starts dominating. He actually transferred from a school in Galveston to another school, I believe, in Texas. But I like to say he's from Galveston, Texas, because that's really his hometown. So he started dominating his senior year in high school. Then Texas starts coming in. Texas, all these other big-time schools start coming in, trying to get in his ear. Hey, we want you to stay home. Well, home is where the heart is, and that's Nebraska. He took a visit to Texas, didn't commit. He took other visits, never committed. He stayed true to Nebraska. He's a guy I'm super pumped about for the next however long we get him. You never know at the transfer portal anymore, but under the assumption that he's going to stick with Nebraska for a while, let's say the next 4 to 5 years, he is going to be someone that has a bright future as a Blackshirt. Let's take a look at who is coming up through the ranks. So who is on the roster right now that we haven't talked about, that's been developing behind the scenes, that maybe we've seen some snaps of, but we haven't seen enough of? There's really two guys for me that I'm kind of keeping my eye out for to come up, potentially make an impact next season or even in 2026. The first one I can think about, Sua Lefotu. He's someone that has decent size, good size, actually, for a defensive tackle. He's 6'3", 300 pounds. He's coming off a season-ending injury. I believe the year prior is when he got into a car accident back home in California. So he should be fully healed. I think he then got re-injured again during the season, this season. So I'm assuming he's going to be fully healed by fall camp at the latest. I honestly don't recall what his injury was that he suffered. And if it's a significant injury, Nebraska's interior defensive line depth is going to take a big hit because the guy we're bringing in, Gabe Moore, I think is a rotational guy at best, heavy package guy. And I kind of think the same thing for Sua Lefotu. So it kind of depends on how he comes back from his injury. The other one to keep an eye on is the former walk-on Dylan Parrott. He's probably our biggest defensive tackle. He could probably play offensive tackle. He's huge. He's 6'5", 320 pounds. He's someone that can certainly develop over time. We saw him come in blowout wins this season. We saw him play some in the bowl game as well. And that's obviously because we lost a lot of guys to the transfer portal. Like I forgot to mention Brody Tekaloa. He left for the transfer portal as well. So we've lost at least 4 guys now that I can think of on that defensive line. Dylan Parrott is someone I could see that Nebraska uses really in short yardage situations, 3rd, 4th and short, 4th and goal, or even really any goal line situations. He's going to be that heavy goal line package. Now on to my favorite position on the defense. The position I think that has more upside than any position, the linebackers. Let's talk about their play first from the Pinstripe Bowl. Vincent Shavers, dog. Willis McGahee, dog. I even posted that on Twitter or X or whatever the heck you want to call it. Those dudes are certified dogs. They are going to come into Nebraska next season probably as your starting jack, your starting outside linebacker. Vincent played 44 snaps. That was the most snaps he'd played the entire season. Well, what did he do with those 44 snaps? 6 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, a forced fumble that Boston College unfortunately fell on. He just made a huge impact literally from the jump. Remember the first play of the game. He came on the blitz. He lit that running back up for like a 3 or 4 yard loss. That was like the moment for me where I was like, okay, he has arrived. He had the top tackling grade on the entire defense at an 82.1 per Pro Football Focus. He reminds me of Levante David a little bit. He's similar in that stature. They're in that 6'2", 6'3"-ish range. When Levante was playing at Nebraska, he was in that 210 to 215 range. I think Vincent's probably a little bigger. He's probably 220, 225 or so. But his game just reminds me so much of Levante. Just a guy that can go sideline to sideline, a guy that can blitz, a guy that can drop back in coverage. There's just so much to like about Vincent Shavers' game. He's someone that has a super bright future, and he's from Florida. Give us all the Florida players. Those guys are a different breed. We even talked about in the other videos, guy from Florida, Ja'Cory Barney. Like there's these guys from Florida are just a different breed. So go ahead, keep recruiting Florida, Nebraska, because I certainly and the rest of us love when we get these Florida kids up here that just love football and all they want to do is play football. Willis McGahee, he was backing up MJ Sherman at the jack position for the duration of the season. And really, he was backing up even Princewell Uman-Mielen until, honestly, probably the Ohio State game. And then Princewell got benched. Yeah, that's the way I see it, because that's when Willis McGahee really started to come along, was when he started playing more behind MJ Sherman. He took over for Princewell Uman-Mielen at the jack position. The son of Miami running back legend Willis McGahee. Willis McGahee had the option to go to Miami. He chose to carve his own path, come to Nebraska, come up north where it gets cold, just like it is in Kansas City right now, where we're expecting an inch of ice and 13 inches of snow and negative 30-degree wind chills here in like the next 45 minutes or so is when it all's supposed to arrive. So he chose to come up from the beautiful sunshine state of Florida to the frozen tundra of Lincoln, Nebraska, and it's going to be a great decision for that young man. He played 27 snaps behind MJ Sherman at the jack. He had the highest grade on the run defense for all of linebackers per Pro Football Focus. He was just behind Vincent Shavers in terms of the tackling grade. He finished with a 78.1, so 4 points behind Vincent Shavers. That was good for 3rd overall on the entire defense. And of course, right before the bowl game, linebackers coach Rob Dvorak dropped a little nugget. They are trying to get Javen Wright a 7th year of eligibility. Now, as we know, Javen has had blood clot issues his entire career really at Nebraska. He started out as safety. Then I think it was when Matt Rule and co came in, they moved him down to the second level and they put him at this middle linebacker, this hybrid linebacker role, and we've seen him really take off. The problem is it's when he's healthy. As we know, this last off season, Javen, I believe it went to Germany to see a blood clot specialist because his blood clots had come back, and they got that under control. So he comes back from Germany, and then he keeps going through treatment, and eventually he gets cleared to return to action. The problem is he's not cleared for contact for practices. So throughout the rest of the season, once he was cleared, he was wearing a green no contact jersey. The only time he would tackle or get hit was during the games on Saturdays, which when you think about it is absolutely insane. The guy didn't play really much since spring ball. No contact, no tackling, doesn't get hit. He comes back, I believe for the Indiana game, he plays like 10 to 15 snaps a game as he's reacclimating his body to getting into the games. And he plays as good as he does. He had the most tackles of the entire defense for the Pinstripe Bowl. He had 8 tackles on the day. He played phenomenal. He was great in coverage. I'm a huge fan of Javen Wright. I hope he gets his 7th year. I'm not honestly a big fan of people staying in college for 7 years. You know, a lot of people go to college for 7 years. Yeah, they're called doctors, like that quote from Tommy Boy. But in Javen's right, I am a fan of it because like 3 of the years he's been here, he's been completely derailed by these blood clots. So I'm hoping we can get that 7th year for him. I'm hoping he can get his blood clots under control at the very least, right? Just from a health standpoint, I am hoping that he can get that taken care of. All right, so who else do we have coming in that's going to make an impact next season? Well, we're going to talk portal guys coming in, and we're going to talk high school guys coming in. So we got Dasan McCullough coming in. He was originally at Indiana. He was a freshman All-American at Indiana, and then he transferred to Oklahoma. And he originally started at safety at Indiana, and then Oklahoma moved him down to a linebacker, I believe. So a similar transition that we're talking about with Javen Wright, similar situation for Dasan McCullough. He's a guy that I think they brought in with the intention of taking over for Javen Wright in case they don't get that 7th year. I mean, the similarities between these two is insane. They both started at safety. They both moved down to a linebacker hybrid role. They're both like 6'5", 6'4", 235 to 240 pounds. They're both freak athletes. They both had some injury problems. Dasan missed like the first, I think, 4 or 5 games this season for Oklahoma. Once he came back, though, go watch that Alabama game. Once he came back, boy, did he come back. That dude is a beast. I cannot wait for him to be on campus. That should be here shortly as the semester is starting. A little fun fact about Dasan McCullough. If you go look on his recruiting profile, it's going to say he's from like Bloomington, Indiana. He's not. He's a Kansas City native. So there's another tie back to Jamar Mosey. His dad coached on the Chiefs with incoming Jack linebacker Dawson Merritt's father. Dawson Merritt's father is the defensive backs coach for the Kansas City Chiefs. You want to add another connection from the Chiefs to Kansas City to Nebraska? Well, guess who Nebraska's new defensive line coach is? Terry Braden. Guess where he coaches? The Kansas City Chiefs. Guess who he coached with? Dasan McCullough's father, Dawson Merritt's father. There's a lot of weird connections between Kansas City, the Chiefs, and Nebraska. And for me, as someone who lives in Kansas City, who's from Nebraska, I'm a diehard Nebraska fan and I'm a diehard Chiefs fan. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Add in the Dylan Raiola comparisons to Patrick Mahomes, which we're not going to get into because I think they're quite overblown. Back to Dasan McCullough, though. He's a guy that's going to be coming in. He's going to make an instant impact regardless if Javen Wright is back or not. He's going to be a guy that's playing right away. I'm curious if you have Dasan and Javen on the field at the same time, what that looks like, because I can't imagine as a quarterback, as I'm sitting there in shotgun and I'm observing the entire defense, right? And I go, okay, they have a 6'5", 235-pound linebacker right here that can run and cover and blitz. Oh, and this guy here is 6'5", 240 pounds. He's a linebacker, and he can run and cover and blitz. And then, oh man, I got this guy, Willis McGahee, and this guy, Vincent Shavers over here, that are going to be coming after me as well. I think it's going to be a scary picture with those two on the field at the exact same time. Who else we got coming in through the portal? Sorry, I'm scrolling through my notes here a little bit just to kind of keep me on track. Oh yeah, we had the breaking news today. This was about an hour and a half ago or so. The breaking news that Georgia Southern linebacker transfer Marquise Watson-Trent has committed to Nebraska. He's coming in at 6 foot, 225 pounds. He has 358 career tackles. That is absolutely insane. And the best part about it, he was on the team that came into Nebraska, beat the shit out of us, and got Scott Frost fired. So he's going to be an immediate impact guy. I'm curious where they see him playing. Could be a middle linebacker, could be an outside linebacker. I'm not really sure where they see him playing, but honestly, Nebraska needs some help at linebacker because really outside of the guys we've already talked about, there's not a lot there behind them. In terms of high school signees, who is coming in? Well, Nebraska might have the best high school linebacker recruiting class in the entire country. That's my incredibly biased opinion. Nebraska's got consensus 4-star top 250 recruits Dawson Merritt, who's going to play the jack coming in. And then we also have 4-star top 250 middle linebacker Christian Jones coming in. Dawson Merritt has the size to play early. He's also who we talked about a little bit ago from Kansas City. His dad coaches on the Chiefs. But back to Dawson Merritt. Size to play early. He's 6'3", he's 225 pounds, 225 pounds, and he's a guy that at the jack position does have the ability to drop back in coverage as well. Primarily going to be an edge rusher is my guess early on. As he gets more comfortable and familiar with the college game, the scheme that Nebraska is going to run, you could see them do some fun things with him. He's a guy that's going to be in the rotation early. I don't see him supplanting Willis McGahee from the starting jack position. I'm assuming Willis McGahee will be our starting jack next season. And Christian Jones is coming in. He's got good size too, 6'2", 230 pounds. The one thing about Christian Jones, he played outside linebacker early on in his career. He started off at, I believe it was at Omaha Burke, and then he transferred to Westside for his final 2 years of high school. He is a guy Nebraska had to fight tooth and nail to get forward, just like they had to fight tooth and nail to get Dawson Merritt away from Alabama. In terms of Christian Jones, though, I think last year was his first season full-time playing middle linebacker. So there's going to be some more growth and development that he's going to need to do. He's a guy that I could see potentially redshirting next season, both Dawson and Christian to be guys on the special teams units, potentially kickoff coverage, kickoff return. I would not expect them to be on like a punt return or a punt kick coverage, but both will be rotational guys early. And then I would say Christian does have a potential to redshirt. Obviously, a lot can change between here and now. Obviously, I wrote some of this before we got the commitment from the gentleman from Georgia Southern, Marquise Watson-Trent. So if he's playing middle linebacker, maybe that allows Christian Jones to redshirt. One guy in terms of like the middle linebacker, outside linebacker spot that I am keeping tabs on is Vincent Genatone. He was a freak in high school. He was a guy that Frost kind of borderline wanted to offer, didn't offer, and then he ends up going to Montana. Vincent Genatone is a rare breed in terms of blending size and speed. He's 6 foot, 230-ish pounds. He's an elite athlete. He was a track guy in high school. He was a finalist in the 100-meter sprint in high school for the state title. And the guys he lost to are legit track guys. Jalen Lloyd, Malachi Coleman, legit track guys that he lost to. And keep in mind, when he was doing that 100-meter state championship run, Jalen Lloyd was 5'10", 170 pounds, spent his entire career thinking, I'm going to go to Oregon for track, or I'm going to go to Miami for track. Malachi Coleman was a legit track guy. Vincent Genatone ran track as a way to prepare for football. And he was playing at 6 foot, 215, 210 pounds, running the 100-meter dash. Malachi Coleman was 6'4", 190 pounds. So he was way bigger than the guys he was running against, and the other guys he was running against were legit track guys, and he dang near beat them. He did transfer in, like I mentioned, from Montana last season. A little fun fact, he was actually projected to be the starting either middle linebacker or outside linebacker for Montana. and the starting kick returner. So when I tell you he's an elite athlete, you're not going to put a middle linebacker or an outside linebacker as your starting kick returner. He was in line to do that at Montana. Another guy to keep tabs on is going to be Maverick Noonan, 6'5", 240 pounds. He flashed in his limited action last season. His true freshman season, he did have a season-ending injury. So I'm curious to see, okay, now he's had a full season with no injury. Where is he going into year 3? But that's all I got for right now. We're going to wrap it up. I got to get to this Nebraska basketball game. It is 12:50. We got tip-off in 10 minutes. Stay tuned for episode number 2, or part 2, I should say, tomorrow, where we're going to be looking at the defensive backs, and maybe we'll dive into a little bit of the special teams disaster. There's some rumors that Ed Foley might be getting canned today, but I'm not sure about that. We'll cover that tomorrow if that does happen. Appreciate you tuning in. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Welcome in to the Cornhusker Huddle.